Thank you very much, Kathy. Well, South African Airways has a new leadership at the helm, and they are led by Professor John Lamola, who is the chairperson of the board and the CEO as well. After decades in the air and tens of billions of taxpayer rands spent bailing out the airline, there is renewed hope that the public-private partnership will fulfill SAA's strategic goals and ensure that the airline grows into a sustainable and world-class airline it once was. And tonight we're joined by Professor Lamola himself to talk more about the process of rebuilding SAA. Professor Lamola, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Colin. It's a pleasure.
You have a huge responsibility of ensuring that the business rescue process itself, in order to rebuild and save SAA, lives up to what it means to do. Tell us about the first few months that you've been there in these dual roles trying to rebuild SAA.
Well, it's not the one-man job. There is there's a deep history of people in SAA who are very equipped at the managerial level and at the board level that we are working with, supported by the Ministry and the Department of Public Enterprises. As you mentioned, sir, SAA that we are leading now is a new SAA, and ourselves have come in as part of a code of leadership to see SAA in transition out of business rescue to where it is emerging as a totally different airline, an airline where it will be partly and jointly managed and led by a private entity and not as a 100% state-owned entity.
Let's talk about the trust deficit. Really, a lot of people some people don't believe that there was anything to save at SAA. Some people believe that even the moves to actually save it and the billions of rands that have been spent by the government are actually a waste. But you are of a different view. Of course, you took up this job because you have a different view that we can rebuild this airline into a much more profitable and sustainable airline.
Indeed, Colin. As an aviation professional and someone who understands that air transportation has a critical role to play in not only in the social and economic development of a country, but in connecting people, in developing tourism and air travel. That's a general statement. But with South Africa particularly, the issue of our geographic location at the bottom tip of Africa necessitates that South Africa has a very strong and viable airline, particularly an airline in which the people through the state have an investment. And we believe that SAA has a number of core capabilities that even after business rescue can be taken forward. For instance, South African Airways is a very revered and valuable corporate brand throughout the continent of Africa and globally. And SAA has assets that can nurture the growth of aviation know-how and transformation in South Africa.
There's been well-documented corruption in the past. Obviously, government was the majority shareholder. Right now, government is a 49% shareholder. There's a new public-private partnership that is in the works with Takatso Consortium, and they will be the 51% owners of the airline. What's going to be different this time? Because really, when you look at the history of SAA and the billions spent, there is a lot that people will say against it and not actually worth saving.
Okay, two things perhaps. The first one is that the investment, the billions that have been invested in SAA, and I'm saying this carefully in that the aviation industry, it's a high and deep capital investment business. And it's not only in South Africa that governments have spent billions of dollars in saving their own airlines variously, even in the United States of America, through tax incentives, etc. Because governments generally understand the strategic value of airlines. But for us in South Africa, we must be careful that we are not only talking about bailout in a generic sense of the word, but that South African government has been a shareholder, 100% shareholder. So if you are a shareholder in a company that is in trouble, you are beholden to the fact that you have to follow your rights in terms of coming up with capital, etc. And corrections say that currently SAA is still 100% state-owned. The process is still underway. The Takazo Consortium has not yet closed and taken its 51% as such. Okay? And what is new, secondly, we are in a what we call a post-Zondo era. We ourselves were appointed to lead SAA middle of last year when SAA came out of business rescue. And there is a very serious move to clean up the processes of SAA, to clean up its corporate reputation, and to make it a viable business going forward.
The Institute of Directors of South Africa have said that this renewed move to actually rebuild SAA has started on a wrong footing, where they believe you shouldn't be appointed to play two roles of executive chairman and CEO because of the privatization of such a company is such an important thing, and they believe those two should be separated. And we've seen examples in the past of why they would say that should be the case. Why shouldn't they be worried? Why shouldn't the public be worried about you playing two roles?
Yeah. Theoretically, the Institute is right. However, in business, there are corporate situations that have necessitated this particular move. It's not South African Airways as a company is not the first one and the only one to do this. But in this instance, we have had a requirement where the minister has felt that it's important that SAA is such a very precarious transitional period where we are dealing with a transaction of a restructuring that requires a very close collaboration between the board, which I lead, as well as management. And as a company is in transition, it's very difficult, for instance, for us to get a long-term CEO. We are interim because in the 3 to 6 months from now, when the transaction with the Takazo Consortium is closed, it will be the prerogative of the new board to then appoint such a CEO.
Is SAA being sold for 51 rands? And I'm asking because I also want to know from you, as the interim CEO and executive chairman of the board, what such news means. What does it do to the drive for you as management to change the face of SAA? Now the news comes and it's being sold for 51 rands. There's a court process of someone who was bidding who did not get the nod for this particular contract. 51 rand for SAA. What do we need to know here?
No, SAA is worth much, much more than 51 rands. However, SAA has come out of a business rescue as a distressed asset. Okay? And what the process has gone through is a process where there was a need for a recapitalization of the business. And a strategic equity partner was chosen who will recapitalize SAA. And the amount of the quantum for the recapitalization of taking the business going forward has been set at 3 billion rands. Okay? It's 3 billion rands. Now, nominally, like in any MOI, the shares of SAA say they are at 1 rand each, 100 shares at 1 rand each. So there will be a nominal shares of ordinary, a nominal price of ordinary shares at 51 rands. But the actual cash that the Tagazo Consortium will put into the business is 3 billion rand and possibly more. So, however, yes. but the point to emphasize is that we as management, now talking more as the chief executive, our focus is on the ground, is on ensuring that we have an operational airline that is profitable, that is well organized, and that is a force to reckon with internationally and locally within the aviation market space. And that's where we are currently, growing SAA, rebuilding its reputation, making it a bankable business.
That is quite a serious statement that you put in. But when you look at the South African aviation space, Professor Lamola, you find the likes of Comair, who are no longer, who have left a huge gap in the market. And many people will be looking at SAA and wondering if they will survive. How are you plugging that particular gap that has been left in the aviation space in South Africa by the likes of Comair?
Well, certainly the demise of Comair is a loss to the aviation industry and to our capacity as a country to provide efficient and reliable air transportation for our citizens. Comair left about 40% of the market, which it had occupied, which we at SAA since the beginning of June have been working rigorously on plans to fill up that market. We have increased our frequencies, and we are now going into a second phase starting from next week, where we'll have now 6 daily flights to Cape Town and about 5 daily flights to Durban, and increasing our flights to Mauritius. But all of us in the industry have learned from the pain that Comair has gone through, and we are generally worried that the South African domestic aviation market, airline market, has been very tough, and that we haven't been able to have airlines that survive for a long time. Hence, with this restarted SAA, we are very careful, very conservative, making sure that we are only doing what is necessary to ensure that the business is profitable and continues to be of service to South Africa.
Professor Lamola, thank you very much for your time here with us. Professor John Lamola, the Executive Chairman and Interim CEO of South African Airways, saying it's not 51 Rand, there's much more that is the value of SAA, and that the strategic equity partner has put in when it comes to this particular transaction, and they are looking to close that gap that has been left by the likes of Comair.